and greetings, saints of the Most High. This is Rod Thomas coming to you from the DFW on this warm but blessed and beautiful Shabbat. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to fellowship with me here on this blessed day of rest in Yeshua Messiah. And as always, beloved, it is my hope, trust, and prayer that this installment of the Messianic Torah Observer finds you, your families, and your fellowships well and blessed. As I am publishing this installment of TMTO, it is July 20th, 2024, and it is the 13th day of the 4th month of Yah's calendar year. I think we all agree that there is a great deal of stuff, for lack of a better descriptor, a great deal of stuff, things going on in the world around us today. And if you happen to miss a news cycle, you stand a good chance of missing some earth-shattering event that has the potential to affect millions of people in some way or another. These earth-shattering events are seemingly happening at a rapid pace. There is little to no room or opportunity for us to sit off to the side of this life and allow the unfolding turmoil and chaos to go on without us having to make a choice how we are going to deal with or how we're going to handle that chaos or that turmoil. Are we going to take a side and voice our concerns? Will we feel strongly enough about what's going on around us to in some way involve ourselves in addressing those unfolding situations? Do we stick our individual or collective heads in the sand and let that turmoil, that chaos, hopefully pass us by? Or do we do as our God, Yehovah, instructed the Hebrew prophet of old to convey to remnant Yisrael during one of that nation's darkest moments in her history? Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 2 through 4. And the Septuagint reads, "Write the vision, and that plainly on a tablet, that he that reads it may run. For the vision is yet for a time, and it shall shoot forth at the end, and not in vain. Though he should tarry, wait for him. For he will surely come, and will not tarry. If he should draw back, my soul has no pleasure in him." And here's the kicker. "But the just, the righteous, shall live by their faith." Again, that's Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 2 through 4. And I would hope that you would agree with me that the last option that I gave in terms of how we are to respond to the ongoing and unfolding turmoil and chaos around us is the more preferred or God-sanctioned option. We must do what Yah has instructed us to do and not get in the way of or involved in the world and what the world is doing. And this reality that I'm talking to you about here is what this week's Torah reading addresses. I've been led to entitle this discussion, "The Realities of the Messianics' Ongoing War Against This World." And it will be my thoughts and reflections on the 141st reading of our 3-year Torah reading cycle. The Torah reading itself is contained in Deuteronomy, or Devarim, chapter 20, verses 10 through chapter 21, still in Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 21, verse 9. The half Torah reading this week is contained in Yehoshua, chapter 24, verses 1 through 15, and the apostolic reading is contained in 1 John, 1 Yochanan, chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Now, because our Torah reading is somewhat lengthy, I would ask you to read, study, and meditate on it as you are so led on your own. However, we will read portions of the Haftarah and the Apostolic for clarity. So let's get into Yah's Word. The first part of our Torah reading today is found in Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 20, verses 10 through 20. And we find here this concept of the Torah for Hebrews engaging in God-ordained or Yehovah-ordained warfare. If Yah ordains it, that is, he ordains us engaging in a battle against an enemy, against a nation whom he has instructed us to fight against, to come against, to stand against. If he ordains it, one must conduct war and conduct that battle, the ensuing battles, I should say, in a judicial and an ethical manner. In a judicial and in an ethical manner. The waging of such must place a value or a preciousness to human life and to Yehovah's creation, unlike the warfare that is waged in our present day, where there is little to no concern for human life and Yah's creation. We come across this concept of peace in our reading. The Hebrew must seek a peaceful resolution to war when engaging in an enemy that is separated from us by distance. If that enemy who is distant from us agrees to peaceful resolution, then tributaries or taxes are to be levied against the peace-seeking enemy. And there's a reference to this in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 29. Conversely, the Hebrew is required to besiege the non-peace seeking enemy until Yehovah gives her over to us. Chapter 20 of Deuteronomy, verses 12 through 14. In such cases, the Hebrew forces were to slay all males with the sword and save the women, and what the ancient term is of baggage. And baggage, when found in ancient writings, refers to one's children and their livestock. I know it's kind of an inappropriate verb for today's parlance, today's mindset, today's Western sensibilities, but that's how it was articulated back in, of course, the Elizabethan time frame we're talking here. But the spoils of that warfare, that ensuing warfare, also known as spoils, also known as booty, again in Elizabethan English, would belong to the Hebrew combatants, the soldiers who engaged the non-peace seeking enemy. So I know that's kind of convoluted, but let me just restate it again. So those enemies who Yah identifies to us that are a distance from us, we are to seek a peaceful resolution to our conflict. Now, it's not that we just agree to disagree, but that enemy that is remote from us, that is distant from us, must come to terms with and living within the framework of our Hebraic culture. They will become tributaries, and they will become subject to taxes that we levy upon them. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 10 and 11. Now, if that distant enemy who Yah has targeted for us refuses to concede to our demands that they come under the Hebrew way of life, if they disagree, they refuse, but instead decide to go to war with us because they don't want to be subject to Yehovah and his ways, then we are to besiege them. We are to besiege them in their cities until the time that Yah delivers them into our hands. And in that case, the Hebrew is to execute or eliminate all the males in that encampment, in that city, in that community. But the women, their children, and the livestock will be spared destruction, as well as the booty, the spoils of war, will belong to our Hebrew combatants. And then we have the case of the fortified cities of Canaan. Now, bear in mind, as this Torah is, this place in our Torah, Moses is talking to the second generation Israelites. Remember, their parents, because they refused to obey Yah and to go in and take possession of the land when Yah told them to, that generation died out in the desert and were prohibited, denied receiving the land of promise. That promised land would be then turned over to that first generation's children. So Moses here is talking to this second generation of Israelites who are preparing to go in and conquer and receive the land of promise. And so here we have Moses setting the stage on how Hebrews will conduct warfare in anticipation of the conquest of the land of promise. Now, we already talked about those remote nations, those people who are separated from us in distance, but now we're turning our attention to those fortified cities of Canaan, of the land of promise, those people who live there. These Abba Yah devoted to destruction. He marked these nations and people for destruction. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 17 and 18. And when we talk about devoted to destruction, we're talking about extermination of the peoples in those fortified cities with extreme prejudice. Now, if you are so led, either listen to or read my post that is entitled Obedience to Torah, Marked for Destruction, where I go into details and the reasoning behind Yah's instructions regarding those cities that were marked for destruction. So why did Yah mark or devote certain Canaanite fortified cities and its people for destruction? Well, these nations, in these nations were the Hittites, who were descendants of Heth, the Amorites, who were descendants of Canaan, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, who were descendants of Canaan and sons of Ham, and the Jebusites, residents of Jebus. Now, there is also another one that is not contained here in our Torah reading that was marked for destruction, but is given earlier, and that is the Girgashites. That they weren't included here, but regardless, these nations that I just mentioned were devoted or marked for destruction. And they were marked for destruction because they practiced forms of paganism where the people engaged in acts that Yehovah would no longer allow to continue on this earth. Their religious and cultural practices were abominable to Yah. And they would include examples of this was Moloch worship, child sacrifice worship, that kind of stuff. Abominable things, detestable things that Yah did not stomach. If these nations were not eliminated, and the people and their abominable pagan ways were allowed to continue in our presence in the land, they would inevitably entice us to partake in their horrendous, abominable practices, or syncretize or blend or attach some of their abominable worship practices into our worship of Yehovah. Of course, this would completely undermine and ruin our covenant relationship with Father Yah. Of course, Yah's instructions related to those cities and peoples that he marked or devoted to destruction would seem unreasonably harsh to any who were not in a covenant relationship with the creator of the universe. I should say, who are not in a covenant relationship with the creator of the universe, especially in our present-day Western sensibilities. We would find it unreasonable, ridiculous, crazy, insane, harsh, callous, cold. To suggest that we would exterminate these Canaanites with extreme prejudice seems to defy our Western sensibilities of righteousness, of tolerance, humanity, and so forth. But did Father reveal to us in his word that our righteousness was in all reality as if they were filthy, disgusting rags? Isaiah 64, verse 6. And it is within the realm of human self-righteousness, as it relates to the cities that were marked or devoted to destruction, were concerned, that the so-called Jewish sages came into play here. These so-called sages took it upon themselves to question Yah's mindset and his reasoning as it related to Yah's instructions regarding how his people were to deal with or treat such abominable nations and its people. The sages believed Yisrael must seek a peaceful existence with such nations, including the abhorrent ones. Their thinking, these sages' thinking, was such that all nations and people should be offered the opportunity to abandon their paganistic ways and to submit to the so-called Noahide laws. You know, those, I think it's 7 or 8 laws, like that. Maybe it's 9. I don't even know because it's not biblical. But these are laws of righteousness, rules of righteous living that are drawn out of the instructions that Yah gave to Moses and his sons. And nowhere in the Bible were we ever instructed as Nazarene Israelites, as Hebrews, as Jews even, to adopt such practices. It's muddying the water. It's It's denying the integrity and the validity of Yah's covenant with us. And I've gone ahead and placed in this post show notes, or more accurately, the transcript to this post, some of the references to this thinking of the sages for your reference. So just going over to the MessianicTorahObserver.org, find this post under the title that I gave you, and you will see in the transcript the references to these, the belief that these pagan nations, even the abominable ones, should fall under the instructions of the Noahide laws. But the truth of the matter is that Yah abhors, he hates all iterations, all forms of paganism and idolatry to such a degree that he requires that it not be tolerated by us and that it be eradicated from our midst. For our God is not only a jealous God, as stated in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, chapter 34, verse 14 of Exodus, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 9, and chapter 6, verse 15, and Joshua chapter 24, verse 19. Not only is our God a jealous God, but more so, he abhors the idolatrous, evil, abominable behavior that comes out of pagan worship and culture. It's the behavior that completely throws him sideways. Consequently, paganism, idolatry potentially undermines Yah's covenant relationship with his set-apart people. Unfortunately, the pagan practices and their culture that Yah devoted or marked to destruction were, for all intents and purposes, irredeemable. They could not be saved. Their fate had been sealed. This being the case, Yah's set-apart people cannot tolerate the presence of such nation peoples in their midst. Why? Because a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, as stated by the Apostle Paul to the assembly of Messianic believers in Corinth. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6, and he also stated this to the Messianic believers in Galatia. And he wrote this in Galatians chapter 5, verse 9. You see, Yah knows that, and he expected that we would understand this reality, that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. It just takes a little bit of evil influence to permeate and affect the entire community. Furthermore, Yehovah does not tolerate syncretism to any degree. And syncretism is, as you may or may not know, the religious soup du jour of Catholicism and denominationalism. Not by mistake, mind you. Syncretism was intentionally added to the so-called early church so that Christianity would be more appealing to the masses. You see, when we're talking about syncretism, we're talking about adopting some of the pagan ways and embedding them into our worship of Yehovah. You're syncretizing these elements, these pagan elements, into our worship. And that is a no-no. Sadly, however, our ancient Hebrew cousins failed to obliterate those marked or devoted nation peoples as Yah commanded them to destruction, which consequently led to us engaging in syncretistic worship of Yehovah, which then led to Yah's judgments and punishments against us. So in engaging our enemies in battle, Yah commanded us to spare the fruit-bearing trees. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 19 and 20. In other words, Yah forbade us from engaging in wanton destruction of the land's agricultural resources. Canaan's productive agriculture was to be spared from wanton or unjustified destruction because it had nothing to do with the abominable culture and practices of the land's evil people. For all agriculture serves a God-ordained, created purpose that we must respect even in the heat of battle. You see, when the elements of Yah's creative order are fulfilling their respective purpose and the will of its creator, Yehovah blesses and he promotes their continued function in his creative order. However, when these elements fail to fulfill their purpose and the will of their creator, and we're talking human, animal, and plant life, they stand to be eliminated from the creative order. And I offer the example of Yeshua cursing the non-fruit-bearing fig tree, as recorded in Matthew chapter 21, for your reference to this matter. Now, let's move on to the second. So we just covered the Torah regarding Hebrews engaging in Yah-ordained warfare. The next section, section 2 of our reading, deals with godly justice related to the shedding of innocent blood in a Hebrew community. And this is contained in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 1 through 9. The Levitical priests were required to inquire and to resolve every complex legal dispute. We spoke about this in a couple of Torah readings ago. And every case of assault would be subject to their ruling, to the ruling of the Levitical priest council. The council of elders of the town where the remains of a murdered soul was found would be required to absolve themselves of the shedding of innocent blood by washing of that town's leader's hands over the carcass of a hamstrung, according to the wording of some of the Elizabethan English, but it means the slaughtered carcass of a heifer and to be placed in a dry river bed. This ritual would be required of the involved community's leaders in the event that there was no identified or known murderer. The leaders of the community who, before the ears and sight of Yehovah, would profess that they knew nothing about the demise of the innocent victim. Their profession of innocence was to be bolstered by performing this heifer ritual. Now, the point of this ritual, despite its seeming futility or pointlessness, really meant to officially address and acknowledge that there was indeed a shedding of innocent blood in their community. Thus, Yah's continued support and promotion of the value of life, the value of human life, which, as Tim Haig of Torah Resources points out, is contrary to our modern secular views and treatment of human life. And we see this disparity between how Yah requires us to value life and how we humans who are detached from Yehovah value life. We see this disparity in the abortions that are conducted in Western nations each and every day. Euthanasia, murder, violence, hatred at all levels, and so forth. The devaluing of life, especially human life, becomes self-perpetuating. It will always lead to continued and increased incidents of violence and murder in any society if not properly checked. So that, in a nutshell, was the overview of our Torah reading. Next, we look at the Haftarah reading. And I generally don't go into the Haftarah readings because the Torah readings are so meaty, and I could spend, and I do spend, the overriding amount of allotted time in the post to that reading by itself, without the Haftarah and without the apostolic reading, because I'm often referencing other passages in Scripture that are relevant to the Torah reading. But I want to continue on with the Haftarah reading because it is so pertinent to the subject matter of our study here today. And here in our Haftarah reading, which is contained in Joshua chapter 24, verses 1 through 15, we have the renewal of the Mosaic covenant under Joshua. And this is Joshua's appeal to Israel to only serve Yehovah. This coming after the conquest of the land of promise, where Joshua, son of Nun, called every Israeli tribe to assemble at Shiloh. And he set each tribe's elders, their scribes, and their judges before Yehovah. Joshua chapter 24, verses 1 through 15. So before the nation and her tribal representatives, Joshua reaffirms the Mosaic covenant after briefly rehashing the nation's history. Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 and 15, and the Lexham English Bible Septuagint version reads as follows. And now fear the Lord, and serve him in uprightness and in righteousness, and put away the foreign gods that our fathers served in the region beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Verse 15, and this is the crux of the matter. But if it is not pleasing to you to serve the Lord, choose for you yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers in the region of them beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites among whom you live upon their land. And I and my household will serve the Lord, because he is holy. Now, the KJV has the more popular rendering, where Joshua says to the nation, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So there's a little difference in the wording of this key passage as it relates to the KJV rendering and the Septuagint rendering. But the gist of the matter is the same. As for me and my house, me, Joshua, and my house, we're going to serve the Lord, and we're not going to serve the gods of these other nations. So here we have an official rejection of paganism, a rejection of idolatry of any form, and an irresistible call for us to serve Yehovah with a wholeness of heart, as Tim Hague expresses in his commentary on this Haftarah reading. Now, this wholehearted service to Yah is tightly linked to this week's apostolic reading. And this apostolic reading is contained in 1 John, 1 Yochanan, chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. And it reads Do not love the world, nor that which is in the world. Because if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Verse 16. Because all that is in the world, that being the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And lastly, 17, and the world passes away, and the lust of it, but the one doing the desire of Elohim remains forever. And this is the scripture's ISR rendering of 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Now, the overriding concept of this apostolic reading is the contrast that John makes regarding love for this world and the love one has for the things of this world versus the love one must have for Yehovah and his ways. In love, in the Koine Greek, is agapeo. Most of us know the term for love as agape. But in this rendering, in this context, the Koine Greek term is agapeo, which means to be fond of or to prize someone or certain individuals, or to prize or be fond of something or certain things that are associated with this world or with our God. Consequently, the apostle points out the realities of there being a distinct contrast between the love, the agapeo, that we may have for the world and its trappings, as well as for the love we may have for Yehovah and his ways. And clearly, at the expense of stating the obvious, the overwhelming majority of folks on this planet love this world and all that this world has to offer them. John chapter 3, verse 19. Of course, this is unacceptable to the Creator, who demands that his chosen, his elect ones, instead love him and his ways unequivocally. Now, this agapeo that is used in this reading, in the context of this reading, is framed in what Greek scholars refer to as the present active imperative. And according to Torah teacher and author Tim Haig of the Torah Resources, I refer to him quite a bit, the present active imperative, that agapeo or agapate, is framed in our text, as framed in our text, I should say, is something that the believer must constantly be on guard against. Of this, Haig continues by quoting a Martin M. Cooley of McMaster Divinity College, who states, quote, the imperfective, that is the present tense, should not be pressed to imply that the readers were currently loving the world and needing to stop. Rather, it is the natural choice for prohibiting an action that is viewed as a process. And this is found in his writing entitled 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, a handbook on the Greek text. And so, if I'm understanding Mr. Cooley correctly, he is saying to us that John was counseling his readers to always be on guard that they do not get caught in the snare of falling in love with this world and with the things of this world. For the truth of the matter is that friendship with the world is enmity with Yehovah, with God, with Elohim, and that whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Yehovah, of God. James chapter 4, verse 4. The Hebrew understanding of love, however, as in contrast to the Greek understanding of agapeo. But the Hebrew understanding of love is, and this is important, I want you to really pay attention to this, because this is where, or this is the side of our bread where we find the butter, where we've buttered our toast. This is very important, that the Hebrew understanding of love is inextricably embedded in the Hebrew concept of covenant. Covenant. Recall that a covenant, aka Berit, or Brit, as some pronounce it, is a binding agreement between two or more parties. The involved parties to the covenant mutually pledge that they will abide in the relationship that the cut agreement stipulates. Each covenant has stipulated actions that are incumbent upon each party engaging in, as well as each covenant has consequences if either party fails to keep their end of the agreement, as described by Tim Hague in his commentary on this passage on 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. And so covenant in and of itself denotes a binding relationship that each signatory to the agreement, to the covenant agreement, has entered into and who has determined to continue acting in accordance with the terms of that covenant agreement. When covenants involve Yehovah and his chosen ones, Yah is always steadfast or faithful in keeping his end of the covenant agreement, even when his people fall short as it relates to their keeping the terms of the covenant. An example of this is given in Isaiah chapter 54, verse 10, and Psalm 89, verse 28. And this is why those who adhere to the tenets of replacement theology find themselves in gross error and in opposition to the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Yah had declared that he will stay faithful to his covenant with Yisrael, and he will redeem and restore them despite their failures to keep covenant with him, to keep their end of the bargain. He will stay faithful to the covenant. Our love for Yehovah is then defined by our demonstrated faithfulness, our steadfast loyalty and wholehearted keeping of the terms of the covenant that Yah cut with us back in the day. That is, keeping his Torah and the terms of the marriage covenant he cut with us at Mount Sinai. Our faithfulness, our loyalty, our steadfastness to the keeping of the whole covenant we cut with Yah is demonstrative of our love for Yehovah and his son Yeshua. Is not this what is this not what or how Master Yeshua defined what his disciples' love for him looks like? We find in John chapter 14, verses 14 and 15, as well as in John chapter 15, verse 10, the following, where Yeshua defines what love is from the perspective of the Hebrew view of love, the covenant-linked concept of love and covenant. He says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Are you getting this? The embedded link between covenant and love. It's not just an emotion. It's a relationship. It's a relationship. He says, if you love me, if you have a covenant relationship with me, you will keep my commandments. The one who has my commandments and keeps them, that one is the one who loves me. And the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will reveal myself to him. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. Again, John chapter 14, verses 14 and 15, and John chapter 15, verse 10. So contextually, this is what the apostle meant by us not loving this world or loving the things of this world. And believers possessing the love of the Father in our apostolic reading of 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. He is reminding his readers, John, to not fall prey to forgetting who and what they are covenanted to. You see, note serene, Nazarene Israelites, which we are covenanted to Yehovah and to his ways, not to this world and its ways and its culture. For when we become loyal to the world, we become loyal to its ways, we become loyal to its culture, we have effectively fallen out of covenant with the Almighty and have failed our Master Yeshua. The apostle is reminding us to not compromise our stake and our position in the covenant relationship we share with Yah through the person and ministries of Yehoshua Messiah. Master Yeshua provided us with all we need to remain compliant with the terms of the covenant agreement we have with the Father. That is, we possess his Father's Holy Spirit, and we have his Father's instructions in righteousness, so that our relationship with Abba Yah is not adversely impacted. All of which means that we must not become yoked. We must not become bound with or joined to the things of this world, such as its music, its politics, its ways of thinking, its dress, its attitudes, its practices, sports, movies, inappropriate human relationships, and so forth. There is no room for divided loyalties, syncretism, or compromises in our walk with Messiah. Because Yah abhors all of these things. Consider, for example, the Master's critical message to the Messianic assembly in Laodicea, recorded in Revelation chapter 3, verses 15 through 19. Yeshua said to John, mark this down. Regarding the Laodicean assembly, I know their works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I would that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I am going to vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, rich I am, and I am made rich, and need none at all, and do not know that you are wretched and pitiable and poor and blind and naked, I advise you to buy from me gold refined in the fire so that you become rich, and white garments so that you become dressed, so that the shame of your nakedness might not be shown. And anoint your eyes with ointment so that you see. And lastly, verse 19, as many as I love, I reprove and discipline. So be ardent and repent. Again, Revelation chapter 3, verses 15 through 19. I'm going to stop here because I have come close to my allotted time with you here today. But I would encourage you to pick up where I leave off here with the transcript to this post, where I go into even greater detail about my thoughts and reflections on our apostolic reading. I will post that in this recording, this post, this discussion's transcript for your convenience. Please go there and check it out at the MessianicTorahObserver.org. And again, this is entitled The Realities of the Messianics' Ongoing War Against This World. So in closing, beloved, I pray that you were blessed with what discussion we had today regarding our Torah reading, as well as the Haftarah reading commentary and the apostolic reading of 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. I was blessed in putting it together, and I'm telling you, there is so much here that I could go on for another half hour to an hour, and I know I'm out of time, but I want to respect your time on this Sabbath. And if you do have the chance, go check out the remainder of this post. But I pray that you have an overcoming week, and the rest of your Sabbath will be restful and meaningful. And until next time, may you be most blessed, fellow saints in training. Take care.